Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. My iPad hasn't yet confirmed that to me, but I have grown a little bit more confident about that the go live button in OBS actually means go live, at least recently. So I apologize for the very, very impromptu stream, because usually I like to give like an hour or so of heads up, or sometimes significantly longer than that, before I do any streams. Today it was like 15 to 20 minutes. I had a horrible day today. My shoe broke today. I hurt my wrist like terribly, like ran it against the wall basically. But hey, my Apple Watch is fine. I had terrible allergies for half the day, like with my eyes being red. So now my antihistamines are seeming to help a little bit. It was super hot, it was super windy, so it was literally never comfortable throughout the day whenever like I had to go out or whatever. So yeah, this was quite a day, and then I just fell asleep for several hours once I was done with work. So this is why this stream is a little later and a little bit less prepared, but we still got some very interesting, like very Apple-y stuff to talk about, because of course Apple is kind of famous for its device quality, but also kind of famous for its device gates, which is when there's like a quality issue or just some kind of problem that people didn't foresee, or in this case that people wanted to foresee. Sometimes it happens because Apple chooses like the wrong color material for a device, then that one scratches. Sometimes Apple makes a device too thin and it bends, hint hint at what we are talking about. Sometimes it's about any kind of camera issue, like over smoothing your face with the iPhone XS, of course Antenna Gate, one of the originals, and of course Battery Gate, which was like a complete non-issue, where Apple basically made the software underclock your chip to a degree whenever it started seeing that your battery had degraded too much, and then it was afraid that your battery could literally break itself by trying to give your SoC that much power. And then people went to court against Apple saying like, oh no, you're throttling our devices, even though there's a reason for that. And the same, like any CPU on the market will behave that way if it has like a very bad power supply attached, or it will break that power supply. So and because Apple sells integrated systems that tend to be like reviewed as a whole instead of just like its CPU power versus its raw battery capacity, Apple felt like it was kind of important for them to manage the demands of both parts, as one of them ages. But this was still a scandal all over the world for several years, and several of my friends actually like sort of got into tech because of this. Like anybody who's like truly anti-Apple kind of has their roots with Battery Gate to a degree, some maybe as far as Antenna Gate, and then you just latch on to to narratives, and you sort of never let go of the emotions associated with that gate, even though everything around them has obviously changed. Apple's device lineups don't look like they did during Battery Gate or during Antenna Gate. Obviously Apple now has some of the longest lasting battery life on the iPhone 15 Pros and whatever. It doesn't matter, people still go by old habits, and we saw with the previous iPads, when I alluded to a potential BendGate, that obviously making a device much thinner, like 6.4 millimeters, 5.9 millimeters, it can make it very bendy, like because aluminum is bendy by itself when it's pretty thin. Obviously any kind of like metal block will be hard to bend for us humans in general, but once you make it like this thin and inside isn't even like continuous aluminum, but it's like your semiconductor parts, batteries, whatever, then it becomes much more easier to bend and destroy. And in that realm, we actually have quite a lot of coverage today, as a lot of more people have gotten their iPad Pros, as a lot of people who are willing to destroy an iPad Pro have gotten them, and are now basically like evaluating if it's worth it to them to destroy one for the clicks, for the scientific purpose. You can basically see here that definitely it's much more worth to destroy an iPad for JerryRigEverything than for Sam Cole, with like 30 times more views basically on that video, or let's even just be charitable and say 25 times. And yeah, so they've both posted updates. Sam is kind of notorious for being like an Apple guy who really destroys Apple tech, mostly for the views, maybe with some scientific purpose. He got a lot of flack for when he like destroyed Apple Vision Pro for no reason. And then JerryRigEverything is kind of more like a general durability channel. He tests like how rigid, how stiff devices are, how much they resist to scratching, burning. So obviously I probably don't need to explain to my audience who those two guys are, but if you are new to the channel, if you are new to the tech community in general, if you are exploring all of this together with me for the first time, yeah, then I've given you a little bit of an introduction. I should also note, of course, that I'll be going on a little bit of a hiatus starting tomorrow. I'll try to maybe do like a short video while I'm on the go, but don't bet on it. Not a huge fan of that format, to be honest. So if you're watching this, if you're really enjoying this, please subscribe. That way you actually know when like my future videos go up. Hit the notification bell, because that helps a lot, for especially for like live stream videos, so you actually are notified when I go live, because a lot of people seem to get my videos once they've already been like live and are no longer live. So while I appreciate all views, obviously if you can watch live, if you want to watch live, that's very much appreciated. Please like the video, so that helps a lot with the algorithm. Please share it out with your friends and whoever you think might be interested in this type of content. And of course, comment along both while we are live. We have had some very lively streams recently, with a lot of people joining, a lot of people giving their opinions, a lot of people suggesting topics, so you can be part of that. But of course also comment once a video has already been uploaded. That way you can help with the algorithm as well, but also leave other suggestions, constructive criticism. All of that is very much appreciated. And of course, if you feel like supporting this channel directly, you can write while I'm live, leave a super chat or a super sticker with a small donation. That's obviously a big help. And if you want to support this channel directly in the long term, you can subscribe to my Patreon. There are several tiers, including free ones, including the highest one called MarkTech Pro Max, alluding to the iPhone lineup. And yeah, for now we have one Louis God, who is our first and only MarkTech Pro Max subscriber. So with that all out of the way, let's see what JerryRigEverything has to say about the new iPad Pro.
Apple's brand new 13-inch M.
And as always, of course, let me know if the audio and video quality is working all right for you.
For iPad Pro. Apple's brand new 13-inch M4 iPad Pro. The thinnest Apple device ever. Thinner than even an iPod Nano. It's wild to see how far technology has come.
If you don't include the camera bump, yes. Then it's the thinnest at 5.1 millimeters for the 13-inch version, and at 5.3 millimeters for the 11-inch version. As I've said before, some people are asking, why does it matter? Who asked for a thinner iPad? Well, I've said it time and time again, nobody's asking for thinner iPads, but people are asking for lighter iPads. And Apple primarily achieved the weight reduction just by cutting down on that thick LCD/mini LED panel inside the old iPads. And since the new OLED is so much thinner, it's basically just that, plus actually a little more internal structural rigidity, but thinner. And I'm also looking forward to like tests by Max Tech and other channels who will do like a general overview of the iPad by saying like what is its speaker quality, microphone quality, right? All those little things that might sometimes get overlooked, obviously, when people get like a new and exciting like Tandem OLED screen. They might not care that much about those things, but I do believe those are important because the iPad is kind of known to have like incredible speakers, good microphones. Apple removed one microphone. What exactly are the improvements of, if any, on the back camera? Obviously, on the front camera, we know it's kind of only been repositioned as such. So yeah, there's a lot actually to analyze. This is why I'm not the hugest fan of like breaking devices. It feels just wasteful. Like I know people like, well, just give Jerry a like. He can use that, right? At 81,000 likes and at 8.64 million subscribers, he definitely needs a lot of my help. But yeah, I just want to say, like, I like Jerry Rick's videos enough, not that much, but like, we'll talk a little bit about the wastefulness behind like the Sam Cole AppleTrack videos sometimes. It's not that I believe it's inherently evil to test devices for durability. I just believe there are actually like scientific methods to test those things, and if you're basically just doing it by hand, you're kind of like basically doing it for clicks. At least that's my interpretation.
But is it durable? Can it survive everyday life? That's what we're here to find out. Hit that subscribe button and buckle in. We're going to see how this iPad is so thin. Inside the box, we get a color-matched USB-C cable and a 20-watt charging brick. Thank you very much. But
yeah, and of course we can mention that because we discuss channels in general while we react to them. JerryRigEverything is very much like a pro-consumer right to repair guy. He believes that basically you should get everything in the box that you need. He's not a fan of the trend of like removing the chargers, which sometimes is weird to me when people say they're super duper pro environment otherwise. But yeah, he prefers devices that are easier to take apart, that are easier to fix yourself. He obviously doesn't like several Apple policies like parts pairing. He's by no means on the same level as like that. Always forget his name. Like that one repair guy who's kind of known, Louis something or whatever. Is it Lewis? I don't know. Maybe I came up with that just on the spot. But yeah, JerryRigEverything like follows some of those beliefs, which is funny because obviously he destroys devices for a living. But yeah, it is what it is. We all take our money where we can get it, right?
first thing I noticed on this M4 iPad is that since it's so thin, it's actually difficult to pick up off my
Oh
phone.
yeah, it's 60 FPS. I can actually feel that a little bit.
A slight bow in the housing. As someone who works with...
This is actually weird to me because can anybody else actually see that? Like, he will measure it soon and he will discover that it's like 0.1 degrees. Like is he saying he actually saw and or felt it? Or is he saying I measured it and I'm now pointing it out for you? So let's see what exactly he means.
My angle finder on my flat tabletop, set it up against the M4 iPad Pro, and it looks like we are 0.1 degrees off from 0, right out of the box. Splitting hairs, of course, not that I have many to split, but
that's a funny joke.
Between the milling, heat treating, and warping, I imagine not many of these ultra-thin iPads are going to arrive perfectly flat.
And we've already had that discussion, well, not we as in on this channel, but people in the past have said that about like when the iPads went to like that 2018 redesign, and even like the iPad Air 2, which was like 6.1 millimeters. This is when you could get like a very, very small, basically like imperfection. in that usually I'm a stickler for those things, but yeah, at 0.1 degrees, I don't think even I would care.
0.1 degrees is better than I was expecting, though. And to be honest, while I don't personally yearn for ultra-thin electronics, I can still appreciate that packing all this hardware into such a tiny device is an incredible feat. It really is only 5.1 millimeters thick. For my American audience, that's about the same thickness as 3/4, 7 razor blades, or 1/3 the width of a Ben & Jerry's lid.
I'll admit that's kind of funny.
Just for the record, I am not the Jerry mentioned in Jerry.
Though, but like the way this looks, it's just.
However, I am available for adoption. Where was I? Oh yeah. Apple says that in order to increase the overall
Jerry, what are you doing, man?
Logic board. That logic board runs through the center of the iPad, and I can even feel that central rib through the top.
What? You sure about that, man? Like, what are you exactly doing right now? You're feeling it? Like, no. Like, are you pressing through the screen?
Glass with just my fingers. And hopefully we'll be able to see it with our eyeballs in just a few minutes. The most impressive technological addition to the iPads this year, in my opinion, has got to be the Tandem OLED display.
By the way, I think seeing the iPad like this kind of gives a good opportunity to discuss some other things. Like, look at the bezels, right? Some people have complained that they're too thick, and yeah, Apple could reduce them, but there is no notch. In comparison to the iPhone and even the MacBook, I've said it before, the iPad is very much supposed to be like used like omnidirectionally in a way. Like, yes, it has like a fixed orientation inside like a magic keyboard, but once you actually try to just lift it up and use it in your hands, you can use it in portrait, you can use it in landscape, you can use it upside down in either orientation, and the notch would obviously be extremely distracting for any of that, especially considering like if you're actually using it upside down with a notch like on one side, what happens with like the multitasking line, right, that would show up on where the notch now is? Do we now lose screen to that degree on where the notch is now not where like where your time is and your notifications or whatever? It's just weird to me, like why people are, because some people are saying, well, you're fine with a notch where Apple is fine with a notch, but when Samsung does the notch, well, yeah, the problem is that Apple does like legitimate testing for this shit. If Apple comes out with an iPad Pro with a notch, or even a dynamic island, I would be criticizing it. The reason, like, I criticized the inclusion of the big notch on the MacBook Pro, because in my opinion, I think that notch only makes sense in the size that it ultimately came out in, if they're going to include Face ID. If they don't include Face ID, it should be a much smaller notch, but they wanted to make it a little bit more similar in size to what, like, not even like what the current like iPhone 13 did in terms of notch, but like what the iPhone 10, 10s had in terms of notch. So yeah, and I was against that, but I was in theory for a notch overall, just where the camera is and maybe where like that light flash indicator is, because the camera flash indicator is, because what it allows Apple to do is just integrate the camera seamlessly alongside all your other like tools, control bar basically, and then that makes it makes them able to make the screen just a little bit more tall without like changing the actual like dimensions of the device that much. This is why we now have an aspect ratio that is actually taller than 16 by 10, and it's actually exactly taller by however tall like that status bar is, that notch is, because this is how Apple designs shit. You can like it, you can dislike it, but at least it makes some cohesive sense. The notch on like a Galaxy Tab S Ultra makes no sense given how Android is designed, given how tablets are kind of designed to be used in general. Like, if you just want to say, oh, it's fine while it's in landscape mode, yeah, well, that's kind of your beer, but then it becomes annoying in portrait mode. It becomes utterly stupid once you try using the iPad in like the reverse version of landscape, basically. But yeah, people don't really care, and this is why we'll later briefly take a look at Samsung's new ad, and you will see that people really don't apply the same standards, though thankfully at least some people are. And this is why we can actually have those discussions, because it's not like I'm unique here. There are other people doing it, pointing this out, giving me information to work from in the future. So for now though, let's continue here.
My microscope. OLED screens are awesome. The individually lit pixels, as you can see here through the microscope, deliver super crisp and vibrant.
By the way, also like a big opportunity. Sorry.
What Apple has done here for
a big opportunity to talk about actually like Apple's OLED screens, because people don't quite understand. They think that if like the underlying material and of course the underlying technology is very similar, that means that now the screen is exactly the same, right? So if you're using like an M13, M15 or whatever material from Samsung, that means whatever screen ever gets created by Samsung on that process, let's equate it to like a node from a company like TSMC, that means that all those screens are identical. That is not true. This is the same as saying that every chip created in TSMC's N3E node will deliver the absolute same single core performance as the M4 chip inside the iPad Pro. Apple does several things in their custom designs. For one, if it was not a completely custom design, well, if it wasn't at least somewhat of a custom design, then Apple wouldn't be able to have LG build it, right? If it was completely proprietary Samsung tech, then LG wouldn't be able to just take their tools and create the same one. That's not how it works. And Apple has several mitigations for the problems of OLED. For example, Apple uses extremely large, on the iPhone that's also the case, blue subpixels. And part of that is because blue on organic light emitting diodes is the subpixel tag that dies the fastest, right? Basically, in order, you can actually guess it when you look at the subpixels here. It's first dies blue, then dies green, then dies red, right? Can you see Apple's like reflection of that? And yes, everyone will do like, oh, okay, then we will do like slightly larger blue. But when you actually look at Apple's panels for the iPhone, you will find that they sometimes have like 50% larger blue subpixels than like a competing Samsung one, because obviously Apple knows that their devices are used for a very long time. They know that people will be complaining for quite a while, even if a device screen like starts getting bad 7 or 8 years into its usage. Apple still wants it to be at least somewhat decent, and this is why they're mitigating for stuff like burn-in, because obviously if a pixel dies, then so dies when a subpixel dies, so does the ability of a pixel to create like a truly new color, right? Because now 1/3 of its color reproduction is completely dead. And obviously it also it just screws with the electronics basically of each pixel and whatever. So yeah, it's not great, but Apple mitigates for that. And then of course there are software layer mitigations for stuff like burn-in. Apple's display controllers are designed to be efficient, so that the actual power consumption of the screen is somewhat lowered. So anybody who's like very, very like into tech and is looking any of that shit up, I promise you will actually find like a lot of details where specific implementations very much matter. It's like saying that every like Windows device that has like the 8040U chip is exactly the same because of that. You'll find there are different implementations in thermals and how good the motherboard is, how good other components are, and this obviously goes beyond that by a lot when it comes to the customization of a product, of a specific technology. In fact, right now Samsung isn't even like shipping most of those panels. LG is, because they are like pretty much the first ones to really nail Tandem OLED. You obviously have to like make the outer layer transparent, you have to perfectly align them, fit a lot of like electronics even in between the layers to a degree without creating like noticeable issues. So it's actually very, very like intriguing in the way that it kind of mirrors like the human eye almost. Maybe I'll go to that biology lesson at some point. But yeah, it's a very impressive piece of technology, not because, and this is a common misconception when people praise Apple for a specific technology, it's not that people are claiming, oh, Apple invented Tandem OLED, or oh, Apple invented mitigation tech for burn-in, right, on OLED, or whatever else, right? It's just that Apple helps finance all of that stuff at Samsung, at LG, because they're such a huge customer. They actually are encouraged to like develop new technologies for them and with them, Apple's engineers, similar to how they are even involved with the design of new TSMC nodes, because they're like seeing what TSMC is doing, they're providing feedback, they're saying what they might want, or in terms of efficiency, or like 3D layering with the EUV stuff, right? It's all basically a cooperation, and the fact that people are just trying to downplay, it's like saying, oh, Apple buys this part, or Apple's chips are only as good because they buy like early access to the new node, and then we actually like look at what other companies are delivering on the same node a year later, so they actually have a new architecture and a new node, and then it's still not matching like Apple's single core results or whatever, still not matching Apple's efficiency, and then people are like, oh, Apple is cheating by using like a lot more cache, but then people are like, oh, but then like, oh, but this processor apparently isn't cheating by being 40% larger. It's all very, very selective outrage, because quite honestly, there is nothing to be outraged about when it comes to Apple cooperating with companies like Samsung, LG, Panasonic, whatever, TSMC, and then creating their stuff on top of other stuff. That's just how the industry works. At some point, you just cannot own enough patents to create everything from scratch. The only reason why Samsung is as big as it is, it's probably because it's like very much in cahoots with like the South Korean government, and in any Western nation it might actually be broken up for like anti-trust laws and anti-compete practices, because you have like semiconductor businesses, display businesses, camera businesses, an overall mobile division for like smartphones, tablets. They produce like desktops, of course they have their NAND storage, they're very important for RAM production. And they got there to a degree because South Korea is like a very technologically advanced country, but it has actually incredibly low levels of competition. So over time, one company became the largest. All engineers basically started working there. And yes, while on a worldwide stage, we still have like Micron, SK Hynix, LG, and whatever that compete with Samsung. Basically, no other company produces as much individually as Samsung does. Like, this is how Samsung builds like freaking tanks basically to a degree, like Apple doesn't. So if you ever think that Apple is like anti-compete and antitrust, please take a look at Samsung.
For the first time ever, is stack two OLED screens on top of each other. So not only are there 264 pixels per inch, but there are also, apparently, 264 identical pixels below those pixels acting as a backlight. An OLED backlight for an OLED display. This gives us a ridiculous 1000 nits of HDR brightness, with the 1600 nits peak. If you notice, the file icon on the M4 iPad Pro has super long blue diodes, while the iPhone 15 on that same folder icon has much smaller diodes within the exact same footprint.
Yeah.
This is actually only because the iPhone 15 OLED has twice the pixel density and is in no way comparable to the Tandem OLED conversation, since my microscope only sees in a 2D plane.
But you can also see also here even, right, like blue green, red, right? Here green and red are somewhat very comparable, but like, yeah, the blue is obviously still the largest, but yeah, you do have differences like the Pental Matrix OLED. This is why you have like this, I don't even know, would this be like diamond layout the way that it is for Samsung? Basically, like some subpixels are shared between other pixels. This way the subpixel density can be reduced, but you can offset that by having a lot more pixels individually. On the iPad, Apple chooses a slightly different approach. This is why the iPad is actually getting praised for having very, very high like image quality in comparison to what one would expect from a 264 ppi screen. Obviously, the iPhones are like 460 ppi, but so yeah, there are like individual decisions here that also have to do with like, you don't want to increase the resolution in quite the same way you did with the iPhone, because obviously you have like already quite a big load for the GPU, so you just want it to be like basically as good as the previous one in clarity while still offering all the advantages of OLED. Maybe at some point Apple switches to a new subpixel layout and then sees a reason to increase overall pixel density. But yeah, I tried out the M4 iPad Pro and its Tandem OLED screen at the Apple Store, and it looked good, it felt good, it was incredibly responsive. There were no issues. Like I've heard people ask like, oh, can you see like a layer below the screen layer? And no, you cannot. Those are fused together the way that it's done. It wouldn't work. It was just like two panels right on top of each other. No, they're fused together, those panels, and as he rightfully says, basically one becomes like a backlight layer for the other. So that's actually quite impressive as a piece of technology.
And Tandem OLED exists in 3 dimensions, but it still looks cool and it was worth a shot. The Tandem OLED isn't the only thing Apple changed up. There's quite a bit more hardware inside of the Apple Pencil Pro. I'm definitely not the target demographic for a $129 professional pencil, especially when my razor knife is only $15. But I guess it just depends on which side of the tablet you'll be drawing on.
I don't like
As you
that.
saw, the tip is removable, and inside that plastic housing is a pressure-sensitive ribbon that can sense minute pressure differences from your fingers. We first saw this technology debuted with the HTC U12 Plus Android phone back in 2018. The ribbon triggers a taptic engine that we can find past the square mounting magnets. It's all tucked up.
Couldn't go without an Apple teardown without mentioning that somebody had something first. Also, like, if he's saying 2018, is the new layout of the Apple Pencil Pro that different from the Apple Pencil 2 that was introduced in 2018? I'm not asking that to like give Apple the crown necessary for Apple Pencil tech. I don't give a freaking care as long as I get a good pencil. But yeah, it was just a weird shout out a little bit.
Into the back end where the eraser should be. The taptic engine makes it realistically feel like an actual button is getting clicked, even though there are no clicky buttons.
This thing is like super jam-packed. Like, even like when Apple introduced that original Apple Pencil, there was already quite a lot of stuff there. But this now feels with like the haptics, the squeezable stuff. It just feels like this is like super duper hefty, like for what it is. Obviously, that's kind of awesome for a pencil. You want a pencil to be nicely weighted and balanced, but it's just so interesting to see. Like, this is why I believe why Apple sometimes increases pricing. It's because they know that if they get people adjusted to a new price, they can then ask that price again with new features, and suddenly people start feeling like it's a great deal, right? This is why $129 might have felt like a lot in 2018, but now after all the inflation, it feels a little bit less in 2024. And now we have a pencil that is much better with haptics, Find My integration, that gyro thing with barrel roll, right? And suddenly it's now a good deal, not just like an acceptable deal if you want to use it with like an iPad Pro, but suddenly it's actually something desirable. So yeah, Apple knows how to condition their customers.
Piece of engineering and an interesting tool built for a very specific job. Some of my favorite tools, however, are my Mohs picks, which help us differentiate between different materials. The Tandem OLED Apple is using this time around feels to be protected with glass, And since there are no marks left by my
I mean, Apple has always used glass on the iPad. Like, this is not a statement. Ever since like Steve Jobs tested the original iPhone in prototype form, and they were at some point using like a plastic screen, Apple was like saying and Steve Jobs was like saying that's absolutely unacceptable. It feels like crap. He personally went to Corning, which, by the way, yes, if you ever think what made Corning as big as they ultimately became, it's Apple, very much so. And he went to them because they were like one of the leading up and comers in like glass technologies, and he told them, can you make that work with the digitizers for touchscreen input and whatever? And they made it work. They created a very breakable screen by all means, but an incredibly clear cover, which also was like tech that at that point still needed to be figured out in a way. And of course it felt smooth, it felt great to like scroll on, to zoom in and out on. So yeah, this idea that like, oh, Apple is using glass, yeah, no duh, Sherlock.
Those 2, 3, 4, or 5 picks, we can be sure that Apple is using a thin tempered glass screen that scratches at a level 6 with deeper grooves at a level 7. The most hardness is especially relevant this time around when we open up Apple's new Magic Keyboard. We already know that something at a softer level on most scale of hardness cannot scratch any of the levels above it.
Oh, looks so freaking clean. Man, that new Magic Keyboard looks so good. Like, that much larger trackpad just does so much for me visually. It just feels more balanced. When it's not like half, but it's like a third, or actually a little more, of like from this to this. And it's probably like almost exactly a third of the overall like bottom layer, but yeah, it just looks so much better than the last one. I didn't even buy the last one because I didn't think it was worth like 400 euros. And I was actually right in most ways, and especially then Apple introduced like universal control, and whenever I now use my Mac, I like just move my mouse to the side. I believe I now have turned that off for my stream. So, but yeah, it's just great the way all Apple devices interact. It kind of like saves you some money on having some accessories basically like double or triple. You just use whatever you have, and it works with everything else. But you just have to use a whole MacBook, right? So obviously you cannot go a lot cheaper with that. You can just go more convenient.
3 aluminum won't scratch a level 6 glass, and a level 6 glass will never scratch a level 10 diamond.
Yeah.
However, this time around,
basic
Apple's
physics.
Magic Keyboard is made from
But by the way, that is also like a little bit like not quite true. Even though it is absolutely true, it depends a tiny bit on like how coarse something is, and how one surface compares against another. Like Apple, for example, if you look at Apple's nano edged glass, one could like think that it's basically the same glass, but with some imperfections for like differently dispersing light. But those imperfections will have an impact for how stuff feels on it, how it potentially scratches and stuff like that. The structural rigidity is already slightly impaired, and then of course, like even just on a fluke, you can sometimes technically scratch something that is harder if like whatever you use is like extremely sharp, and whatever other you have might have already some structural imperfections. This is why sometimes I would try to tell people, yes, like technically a coin like shouldn't scratch like your iPhone screen, basically, because it's like not level 7 where the iPhone starts to scratch or higher, but your iPhone screen starts to have some imperfections on top. It also has like other layers there for like oleophobic stuff, so that basically like it doesn't get way too dirty way too fast. And if like an edge of a coin just gets super duper sharp or whatever, or the pressure is just right, there might be also an element of where it like partially it scratches, but partially it almost like cracks. again, it's not precise physics. What Jerry is saying is absolutely correct, but it's just that real world is a little bit of a B word, and in that regard, you kind of have to look out for that. Yes, sometimes you have to be a little more careful than you might want to be.
Aluminum. The keys themselves are plastic. Anodization is necessary for material protection, aesthetics,
I hate that
as
sound.
There's a rather large 1% of the human population that has a bare aluminum contact allergy.
Yep. That's actually where my speciality comes in. It's like with dermatology and allergology. I don't know how to pronounce it correctly in English for some reason. Basically, the study of allergies. And yes, it's actually, as far as I know, currently like sub 1%. It's hard to say, honestly, what exactly the rate for such an allergy is or would be, because we are not really exposed to like non-anodized aluminum anymore that much. Obviously, a lot of industrial processes have changed. For a lot of people, it's more like nickel, which creates allergies, because it's like used like a cheaper metal for accessories, especially for like earrings and rings or whatever, and that can create allergies. Even like belt buckles, for example, like stuff there can be out of nickel, and then you get like a red rash. It's not quite the allergy that makes you like sneeze and makes your throat close up, but it is nevertheless an allergy, and the best way to cure it is to basically, well, it doesn't cure the allergy, it cures your symptoms by avoiding contact with that metal in the future.
We learned this while building wheelchairs at my factory.
Oh, nice.
Aluminum is not like kryptonite or anything. It's more like a slow motion.
Yeah, and that of course goes also for anything you put in the body. This is why like a lot of like hip replacement stuff, it's like titanium and whatever, because that one doesn't create allergies to the same degree as other stuff. So yeah, the human body is quite interesting.
Poison ivy rash after extended contact.
That's correct.
The aluminum oxide anodizing top layer helps eliminate those reactions. F in chat for the F. But that same aluminum oxide coating also ranks at a level 9 on Mohs scale of hardness, which, when pressed right up against the level 6 glass display of the M4 iPad Pro, makes me worried. However, even though the metal is coming directly in contact with that glass, the Magic Keyboard hinge does not allow for any lateral movement, which reduces the abrasive potential. And to further decrease worries of accidental scratches, I took my level 9 anodized iPhone 15 and scuffed up the iPad glass as well as I could. But each of the marks wiped completely away.
Yeah.
I imagine the surface lubricity of the anodizing and smoothness of the glass, along with the rigidness of the Magic Keyboard, will all help to keep the glass undamaged.
Exactly, this is why I'm trying to tell you. Obviously, like those smoothed out surfaces to a degree, and however the anodization technically changes a little bit of the harshness of like raw aluminum, one might say. Apple wouldn't have built it that way if it was that easy to scratch. I saw the same worries when like the original Magic Keyboard came out. It obviously didn't have the same kind of like aluminum surface, but people were worried about like the way that like it basically like contacted with all the keys of the keyboard. People were saying, oh, that could actually wear the keyboard or whatever instead of the screen. Now we worry about the screen because of the aluminum. I wouldn't worry too much.
Anything to worry about? There's no glaring build quality issues yet.
Yet.
12 megapixel selfie camera tucked into the long side bezel of the iPad Pro, protected with the same scratch-resistant glass, and swinging our way up to the ultra-thin frame rails, we see we have a whole lot more anodized aluminum.
Oh, I hate that sound.
And 2 metal volume buttons that cannot be removed. The top of the iPad Pro has 2 stereo speaker openings and a terribly placed center microphone hole.
It's not terribly placed, it's just very much centered. We've had that discussion with every other iPad that has like anything positioned in the center. We've talked about that with the Apple Pencil charging attachment mechanism. We've talked that about with the USB-C port. We talked about that. Like, it would still bend around this even if it was slightly there. Does it make it a little bit more efficient to break it because it's just perfectly in the center and creates a little bit of a structural weakness point? Yes, but again, most people are not buying the iPad to test it for its bendability or not.
Why second. Moving along to the other long flat side, Apple has removed the microphone hole in the center of this rail. Glad that's gone. And down here at the bottom of the M4 iPad, we can see that the thickness of the iPad is literally constrained by the tiny size of the USB-C port.
Yeah, because this is also what makes like the this is the only thing where making it thinner legit creates like structural weakness points, because you can mitigate for a lot of internal stuff by using more metal inside, just like thicker layering of stuff on top of the motherboard, as Apple did. Even plastics to a degree will help, just whatever creates mass that is in the way of bending. And here obviously there is not a lot of it around a hole, basically, and this is why I would want the iPad to be just a little bit thicker. I actually think that, well, for like perfect touch, I have actually come around on this a little bit, where I have historically said 6.9 to 7.5 millimeters, which is like the thickness of the original iPad Air and later the original iPad Pro. Felt kind of perfect, but of course that does kind of have to account for the fact that those devices still were constructed a little differently. I will take a much thinner iPad, but I just would like it to be, like, especially on the 13-inch, where Apple, like, ever so slightly reduced battery capacity, and it's actually thinner than the 11-inch version. I kind of would have liked for both of them to be at least, like, the same 5.3 millimeters, and then the iPad 13-inch to maybe be, like, instead of 1.28 pounds, maybe 1.31, but have, like, the exact same battery capacity as the previous one, or like 1.33, and have like a slightly higher battery capacity. While I do like me something lighter, and I do appreciate from an engineering perspective something thinner, overall I do still want obviously as much battery life, as great of thermals, whatever, on the iPad.
Which sits right between two more stereo speaker openings.
By the way, guys, if you're watching, please let me know, are you enjoying this? Is there something else you would like to see me cover? After we are done with like the BendGate stuff, I would like to finish the article that we've started in our last stream. And of course, if you're watching along and you're enjoying this, please consider subscribing, consider liking, sharing the video with comments. Of course, you let me know what you enjoy, what you don't, what you agree with, what you don't. So that can make our chats much more lively, much more productive for everyone, and much more fun. And of course, if you feel like supporting this channel directly, you can leave a super chat, you can leave a super sticker right while I'm live. And if you want to support this channel directly in the long term, you can subscribe to my Patreon, link in the description below.
If it gets any thinner, we'll have a camera bump and a charging port bump. Speaking of camera bumps, Apple's removed one of the camera lenses this year, and to be honest, no one's going to notice. There's a lower time-of-flight 3D LiDAR scanner, and the upper circle is the only remaining 12-megapixel rear camera, with a single-color diffused LED flash, which is also tucked into the same camera hump. Now, one of my favorite parts of owning an iPad is its immense canvas for which I can display my artwork. Drawing on the Tandem OLED seems oh so temporary, so I'll just use the back. I learned two new things recently. One, apples are made up of 25% air, which was news to me. And even more interesting, lions, like the anatomically correct beast you see here, actually eat apples. Yeah, they're carnivores and all that, but if they get hungry enough, apples are on the menu. You learn something new every day. To keep your own iPad from getting scratched, might I recommend my teardown skin collab with dbrand. Astute observers might notice that this skin is the same teardown skin as last year.
Yeah.
Because of course we haven't seen the inside of the M4 yet, so how would I have a skin for it? But don't you worry, there's a very large probability that we'll see the insides in about 60 seconds, and then we can start shipping out the real deal. Link down in the description. The coolest part of the Tandem OLED that I didn't mention before is that because of the double diodes, each pixel doesn't have to run at maximum load. Just like a person can walk farther than they can sprint, two pixels working together means that a single pixel doesn't have to work as hard. So overall, the screen uses less power while having a much longer lifespan, which is awesome. There also appears to be no effect on the 13-inch Ultra Retina display from my lighter, even after burning it for more than 60 seconds, so thumbs up for that. Finally, the bend test. No one's going to be putting their iPad Pro in their back pocket, obviously, but it will very much be bumping around in backpacks, book bags, and as Apple's thinnest.
This is why I kind of understand having durability tests, but obviously the way that some of those durability tests are conducted kind of defeats the purpose. But again, it is what it is. We all have to make some money somehow.
Ever, we need to know how this Netflix machine is going to hold up to every day.
Jan Hendrik, hallo aus Hamburg, hallo zurück, welcome to the stream, brother. I don't think I've ever seen you live comment, very, very much appreciated.
Live. When bent from the back, the answer is that it holds up surprisingly well. Like suspicious.
I'm not taking notes here the way I usually do while watching YouTube videos, simply because like what is there, like, oh, it's more durable than people thought, and it's in some ways more durable than the last generation despite being thinner. Whoop up to do, it's Apple. They know how to engineer stuff. I know some people will say, well, that just shows that on the last one they were like cheaping out. I'm like, no, that just shows that they were like not like even thinking that people would do this, or they would think people like would do this, like Jerry, but they were like, oh, this probably won't create any backlash or whatever, like who does this to their iPads? But people did, and this is why we live in the media hellhole world that we unfortunately do.
You can see the glass screen literally ripple away from the frame, eliminating any water resistance.
Yeah, and Jerry's quite strong, like he is like a factory guy in that way, obviously like as an owner and whatever, but like, you know, he works out and stuff like that. So if you're not a super strong individual, I wouldn't worry too much even doing that. It would probably still break, but probably not in the same kind of fashion. And I do want to point out, by the way, that what he showed before, like that 1 minute burn test with his lighter, this is one of the very few devices I have seen survive this test. I don't know if something changed and recently more devices have started surviving this, but maybe it's just that with how those layers are like combined, maybe they're just super duper good at like giving the heat like room to dissipate inside the device and then like not actually hurt it, which is weird with how flames work, where it should at least like show issues like right where it comes into contact with the outermost layer. So I'm actually pretty impressed in that regard, because this still has all the layers that like an iPhone would have. Like it does have protective glass, doesn't necessarily have to be the same kind of Corning glass, because obviously it would aid probably a little bit too much to the cost and the weight specifically of the device. But then it does have to have digitizer layers, has to be recognizing of multi-touch or Apple Pencil input. So the fact that that lighter test performed that well is actually quite impressive. Jan, you're saying the problem is always that you can destroy everything with force. Exactly. If you cannot destroy it with your hands, then you can destroy it with a machine. And once you cannot destroy it with your hands, people will say, well, but if I sit on it right just enough and whatever, and then they will excuse like having testing with like a super strong machine or whatever, which like that's great for the companies actually conducting the tests. But once it's like a YouTube channel that tests like one device, so there's like no scientific method of repetition and reproducing certain results. This is why, for example, when Jerry tested out the iPhone 15 Pro and one of them like bent, people were like, oh, is BendGate back? But it was like one model and it literally never became a larger scale issue, and most reviewers were not able to reproduce that in any way. But it became still a media story to a degree. Oh, my hand completely fell asleep. It's so funny. But yeah, so this idea that this is basically like in any way relevant is funny. Like to me, the fact that the device came sort of bent, even it's like 0.1 degrees right out of the box, if that's true, makes like is far more actually important than the device's ability or inability to bend under extreme force that you apply on it on purpose.
Itself is still intact. Yeah, the M4 iPad Pro might be a bit bendy right out of the box, and will definitely not be straight after a few months of regular use.
That's not true. I mean, I've known a lot of people who have used those things without cases. Technically Magic Keyboard is a case, but the way people constantly pop it off and then use it just in your regular as like a regular tablet. Sometimes I saw even people sit on their devices briefly, or like a cat or a dog at least will do that. Obviously that's far less weight, but again, the loss of like big numbers and like repetition. I am not Apple. I cannot tell you how many people go into the store complain that it bent, or I cannot tell you how many stories on like Mac rumor forums or whatever actually are representative of real world problems. How many of those forum entries might be the same person complaining about the same thing under a different name to get more attention or whatever. Not that I don't want to downplay any durability issues, and I'm all for making every device as durable as possible, but as you said, Jan, it just under pressure everything eventually breaks, even a diamond.
But that central spine is definitely providing enough structure for horizontal bends. I'm very impressed. Vertical bends...
Jerry, very impressed. Jerry.
Still not as wrecked as Drake, but holy macaroni, there's no recovery.
Maybe I should look into all the drama with Drake and whatever. It's like, I don't follow...
Like a rainbow, or a bow and arrow, or a Boeing. Joke just made my life insurance go through the roof. Kind of like that wheel did, but the back side of the charging port itself is what put pressure on the inner side.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is where you get like sub 1 millimeter thick aluminum around it. I would probably say it's like probably half a millimeter there. And like on the top and on the bottom of the USB-C port, with the port itself being like 3 to 4 millimeters thick. Yeah, this is where we get like a structurally weak element. This is where like having a case comes in to avoid actually like catastrophic issues like this, because sometimes this could actually happen, and it could happen with a device that might even be a lot thicker. Like sometimes you will have like a thicker port, but so the metal or whatever casing you might have around it might still be similarly vulnerable, right? If you can barely fit in like a standard USB-A port, for example, that would create similar issues depending a little bit on the device you have. This is why nobody builds like a tablet like this with a USB-A port, even if it could be thick enough to house one. Not this one, but maybe some others.
Cracking it up from the bottom edge. Which means, and now we get to go find the M4 chip. I do happen to have another smaller 11-inch M4 iPad Pro with the nano textured glass. So if this video gets 100,000 likes, we can see if that one also falls apart in the same place. If we roll back the glass like a very expensive tortilla...
Man, by the way, I just want to point out, like, the speakers like take up such a big part of the iPad, like in proportion to basically every other device they have. Those speakers are just so freaking large. Look, I know they don't have much on the Z-axis, so they won't like have this amazing bass or whatever, but like you could say like, oh, maybe Apple should sacrifice like some speaker quality and give us even larger batteries or whatever. But given that speakers are incredibly light for their size, right? This is like basically the speaker. This is the resonance body. So to me, like, I always find it super impressive. And yeah, by the way, a lot of people are misunderstanding the news. Apple has done this, as far as I know, ever since the original 2015 iPad Pro, where they put like the chip in between two batteries. It's incredibly great for cooling, especially now that they have like a copper Apple logo right on top. But now underneath are like graphene sheets and like this this like, I don't know if it's like still part of the graphene or it's like aluminum on top that's just painted black for the aesthetics, because yes, this is how Apple operates. They will care about what is inside their devices on that level. I just think it's beautifully constructed. Real Light 2K, I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Hello, Mr. Mark. Hello, Mr. Real Like. And George E, a great supporter of this channel. channel joining the chat. Oh wait, hello there, Mark. Oh, is that a joke to the room with Tommy Wiseau? Oh, hi, Mark. My nephew's just left the house. Time for some premium majestic content. Well, welcome, brother. We are basically finished with reacting to JerryRigEverything, but we do have obviously quite a similar video prepared for you specifically right after that.
We can get our first...
And now that we have more people, I also want to remind you guys again, please, if you're enjoying this, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when I'm going live, and that obviously helps a lot with the algorithm and other stuff, and helps me get stuff like this, like my silver beautiful play button. Please comment, write in while I'm live. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, what you agree with, what you disagree with. Share the video with anyone who you think could be a great member of the community. And of course, if you feel like directly supporting the channel, you can leave a super chat or a super sticker right while I'm live. It helps out the channel tremendously. Or if you want to support this channel directly in the long term, you can subscribe to my Patreon. Link is in the description below. In the description of this channel.
Look at that center spine, or cowling, that Apple added over the motherboard. This time around.
Oh, Jan, you got the M2 iPad Air. That's great to hear. Yeah, I know that the Pro... I've had that discussion in my last stream where some people were saying, like, well, what do I do? Because, like, well, why would people want an M2 iPad Air if you can basically get, like, either refurbished or just a discounted M2 iPad Pro, M1 iPad Pro? And I've told people repeatedly, people like going to the store, buying the latest thing, having the longest warranty on it, having the longest software support, having the longest access to like parts and whatever. People will even sometimes do like weird configurations, like getting a mid or low range product, but then giving it like a disproportional amount of storage and then making it as expensive as a higher up base model. Everybody has different needs. So Jan, if you are enjoying your M2 iPad Air, all the power to you. I fully support that, and I hope you're enjoying it.
We also have some very circular loudspeakers instead of rectangular. And with 14 Phillips head screws removed, Apple's cowling comes off in 2 pieces.
Yeah, so this seems like it's aluminum that is basically like colored on the other side.
It's incredibly thin, like the rest of the iPad.
Yeah, and Apple has done something similar on the MacBook Air, but this seems like disproportionate, I would say. I would say this is like, granted, the chip is obviously like the same as they would be putting one in the MacBook Air eventually, but for the size of the device, I would say there's more of this, and it's probably better integrated with like just pushing the heat out directly to that large, super even like aluminum back. So I don't know how the iPad would perform with an M3. I assume much worse because it's a less efficient processor, but I wonder if its cooling capabilities are in some ways now superior to the MacBook Air.
Obviously gets the job done. If Apple could add another more perpendicular spine running widthwise near the charging port, where all that structure was removed, this thing probably would have survived.
Blick, you're asking, do you think the M4 is more fragile than M2? Well, I don't really have to think, because everything that we're seeing right now here suggests that it's either just as durable or just as fragile, one might say, as the M2 version, depending on your perspective, or that it's actually more durable with that central ridge basically going alongside it, whatever other changes Apple might have implemented. And especially for like the cellular model, I've said that that one is probably the most improved. Unfortunately, nobody tests it because Apple now has removed like the millimeter wave like hole to a degree, and Apple has like removed the nano SIM card slot. So there's like a big reduction of like structurally weak elements. Jan, you're saying the Pencil Pro is a big game changer. You have only drawn sketches thus far, but the new functions encourage you to do more complex stuff. That's awesome, man. Like, this is exactly why I've said, like, even I like started drawing originally when I got like my big 13-inch iPad Pro. Maybe maybe at some point I'll show you guys what I concocted there. Like I drew like sketches of like the Joker and several Pokemon and whatever, and it just felt like fun. That was like one of the moments in my life where I actually felt like doing something like that. Reliak, what happened to the Geekbench scores? All the guys I watched got 3700-ish. You're interested in chip for future MacBooks? Well, for one, 3700 is already super high. The results where you see 4000, those are with basically active cooling. This is what Geekervan is doing. And the difference between like 3750 and 3900 basically depends what is called silicon lottery a little bit. So sometimes even the same chip with the same die, with the same enabled cores or whatever, with the same cooling, with the same available power, will perform a little differently. That difference might be 1 or 2%, might be sometimes 3 or 4%. It depends a little bit. But also don't forget that a lot of the testing that you see right now is mainly people just opening up their devices, just booting them up for the first time. There's a lot of initializing that happens when you first like install like not iPadOS in general, but when you first log into iPadOS or iOS or macOS or whatever. So people usually recommend keeping a build where you like do benchmarks as clean as possible, like no personal stuff on it basically. And for you, functionally, there will be no difference whatsoever in like a 3800 result or a 3750 result or even a 3920 result. Those differences are incredibly small. They're run-to-run variants. They will also depend specifically on the application you use. Some applications might actually show that they're like using 4.4 gigahertz, but maybe with how the instructions scale, they might actually not fully utilize either the entire IPC or the entire 4.4 gigahertz. So that really depends. Also, I would assume that Geekbench probably gets like an update that is a little more specific to the iPad, not really to improve results, but like to smooth them out a little bit to a degree. And then I've talked to in the past, in like the law of like big numbers ultimately will give us a nice average that we can work with when it comes to computing IPC, when it comes to calculating efficiency and stuff like that.
And there you have it. That structure was removed.
That structure.
Probably would have
there's the graphene. You can see it's actually super duper thin. So this is actually incredibly impressive. This is like cooling in some ways. Like, yes, it's way more cooling than like a smartphone would be. Like, even if you have like a vapor chamber inside like a Samsung phone or whatever, don't forget that those phones have like glass backs. And now sometimes titanium like side rails, so those don't even help with cooling as much as aluminum. But here Apple is like really maximizing the fact that the iPad is like a clean rectangular sheet of aluminum. Basically all of this is helping like push the heat right to the back chassis beyond I think he didn't cover it in this video, like that copper Apple logo. So you do have the aluminum here, you do have the graphene sheets right over the CPU, where he should show it right.
Job done. If Apple could add another more perpendicular spine running widthwise near the charging port, where all that structure was removed, this thing probably
right there, right? So he didn't focus on any of this, unfortunately. But yeah, this graphene is not even used like that much here for cooling. It's basically like together with what looks like a little bit of copper, which is, I believe, now superior to the MacBook Air. I don't remember the MacBook Air having at least this much copper, right? Like, I know it's super thin copper, but every cooling piece on the MacBook Air is super thin as well. So yeah, this actually looks pretty like impressive. Don't forget, this is 5 millimeters thick, so there isn't actually that much even room here between this and the chassis. But then don't forget that while this cooling assembly might look thin, then you do have the giant, especially like on the 13-inch version, the entire aluminum back that helps you with the cooling as well.
Probably would have survived. And there you have it. The
Oh, there's no M4 on it. It's just the Apple logo, and then there's like the memory.
4 chip in all of its glory, right?
Yeah, it doesn't say like the speed of memory or anything, but we could probably get like the part number and try to match it to something. But yeah, it's 7700 megatransfers per second memory basically.
Alongside the 10,209 milliamp hour pouch style battery. Honestly, it's a pretty cool tablet.
Which, by the way, this actually shows like that the iPad is not actually fully maximizing everything Apple could do when it comes to cooling, but it probably doesn't need to because, again, big aluminum back. But here, like this, supposedly on the next iPhone 16 Pro will be like what he like calls a pouch style battery. Yes, but it would have like a metal layer, and I've actually heard people say that metal could be thinner because it's like just structurally more integral than the outermost layer of current battery, so it wouldn't probably even add to the thickness. Now, I'm not an expert here. I would wait until we have devices. Really like saying thank you for the explanation. Thank you for asking. This is why I'm here, man. Blickbig, with an almost same prices, iPad Pro M2 2022 versus M2 Air 2024, do you think it's a good decision to buy the iPad Pro M2 than the M2 Air? Yes, of course. If you buy the M2 iPad Pro, you also can benefit obviously a lot. You can buy an Apple Pencil 2 heavily discounted with the new iPad Air. You can have that new Apple Pencil, right? Which is great, obviously, because that all the M2 iPad Pro does not support the Apple Pencil Pro. So if you're an artist who's somewhat on a budget, I would still recommend like the iPad Air with the newer Apple Pencil. But of course, you do have stuff like ProMotion. You do basically get all the major M2 stuff, from its performance to Wi-Fi 6E capabilities, whatever. I don't know if like the 5G or anything is better on the M2 iPad Air. I haven't yet seen people test or say like if the modem is like significantly newer in these devices. So yeah, if it's the exact same price, I would recommend like a new iPad Pro, like a new M2 iPad Pro, a discounted one. If we're looking at refurbished stuff, I would probably recommend trying to find like that iPad Pro for just a tiny bit cheaper than the iPad Air. Again, you do get stuff like well, it depends a little bit, right? For the 11-inch version, I would say try to find it a little cheaper, because then you do have like only the difference between ProMotion or not. But on the 13-inch models there, I would say you might even be still in the fair price category looking at a refurbished iPad Pro at the same price as the new Air, because you don't just get ProMotion, you also get the mini LED screen. But again, I know some people will just prefer to buy newer, so I don't actually discourage that.
Honestly, it's a pretty cool tablet. Congrats to Apple on the Tandem OLED development. Let me know if I should test the smaller unit, and grab your teardown skin with the link in the description. Thanks Tom for watching. I'll see you around.
Yeah, so that was a fun one. Obviously, we have reacted to this. By the way, like, has Marquez Marquez also said like a while ago that he wouldn't be posting as much recently because he's like preparing for like the Frisbee World Championship. Maybe that's impacting his reviews or whatever. But yeah, let's try basically the polar opposite of MKBHD, Sam Cole and AppleTrack. I don't actually watch that much. Like, I know that he calls like his Twitter handle is like iUpdate. I always thought that was like a separate thing, but on YouTube I can only find AppleTrack. Obviously, I'm a nobody in the tech sphere. I know that it's not like I'm saying this to like downplay like this channel, which obviously, what the frick? Has 444,000 subscribers, so over 4 times as many as I do, and I assume a much more engaged community, because my community is pretty young. I'm still encouraging people with every video to subscribe, to hit the notification bell, to comment, like, and share. And of course, if you feel like supporting directly, you can leave a super chat or a super sticker right while I'm live, or you can subscribe to my Patreon and support me there directly. Jan, you're saying the video is crass, like the German word for basically like how do you call that basically in English? It can mean everything from great to just like somewhat outrageous. So let me know which one of those versions you mean.
The same thought when we saw these new iPads.
And I'll be speeding
Just
up Sam
5.1
here.
millimeters thin, the new 13-inch iPad Pro with M4 seems unreal. And today, I want to be checking out just how durable these new iPad Pros are compared specifically to the last version, the older design that is a bit thicker. So I hope you're excited for this one. If you are, hit subscribe for more videos like this because they're very expensive. First up is the new 11-inch model of the OLED iPad
And
Pro.
yeah, this is why I say I would actually love to see some durability testing on the 5G models because they actually interest me more, but they're also more expensive, so people are not as inclined to just destroy them. Jan, you were saying the video is basically fancy. Which one? The JerryRigEverything video or this one?
Not wait to see. And it is stupid thin. The 11-inch is 5.3 millimeters, and it does feel pretty strong. The new 13-inch model, though, is even thinner than this. This is the one that I've really wanted to see. Wow. The thinnest Apple product ever made is just 5.1 millimeters. It looks just silly. And the 13-inch also feels pretty impressively strong for how thin it is off the rip.
I've said that as I went to the Apple store, I found that pretty similar. Obviously, I wasn't gonna try to bend them, but it did feel rigid in my hands. It did feel nice. It did feel premium. So and it wasn't just because of the Apple aesthetic or whatever. It legit felt sturdy.
They're going to bend super easy, right? Because Apple just made them stupid thin. But Apple has actually announced that is
this video is definitely fancy in its term that it's like wasting money quite a little bit. Even Jerry destroyed one 13 and one 11-inch model, but he didn't like compare it to the previous generation. This guy is doing one of each.
Expected to be the case. In an exclusive interview with Mr. Who's the Boss, Apple actually described how they put a central logic board with some new material in the middle of the device. Basically,
by the way, just so people know, like Apple could legitimately create an iPad Ultra. And I think that if they ever create an iPad Ultra, I believe this is where the point would come, where Apple would just say, okay, now we might not put macOS directly on the iPad, but this is super big. We are redesigning Stage Manager. We are redesigning all our Pro apps or whatever. Like, let's say they built like a 14.5 to 15-inch iPad Pro, or maybe it's like a foldable that goes from like 10-11 inches to like 14-15 inches or whatever, and then Apple, not so much with a foldable, but just with a full-size iPad that you imagine like going 10% more in this direction, 10%, or even like maybe it's like 15% wider but like 10% taller here. Apple could just create something so absolutely unbelievable, because you saw how thin not just the device is, but because of how thin the device is, the speakers have to be thin, that cooling assembly over the processor has to be thin, the battery has to be thin, right? Imagine if this was like basically like 20% larger in footprint while also being like 10-15% thicker. Because it's an iPad Ultra, because Apple could like say, well, we expect people to just basically always use it in the Magic Keyboard, and when they don't, we expect people to just put it on the table and draw on it or whatever, right? And then Apple could be saying, well, we don't need this to be as portable or whatever. This is now 1.65, 1.7 pounds. It's a full 4 pounds with a Magic Keyboard or whatever. Then you could see where Apple gets like fully crazy, like from a 10,000 milliamp hour battery to like 14,000 while still maintaining like the same base M series processor. All that cooling that you saw there, now basically twice as thick, but still taking up relatively little space. Those speakers, basically the same speakers, but with an even larger resonance body. Basically everything taken to the max. So yes, I know obviously the iPad Pro is great and all, but if you think that this is the limit of what Apple can develop, it's absolutely not. This form factor has so much room for innovation and stuff like that. Jan, you're saying sad that not that many people are watching right now. You find reaction like this really cool. Yeah, it depends a little. I found that people mostly watch my videos once they've already been like uploaded, but I do appreciate we have had a lot more people joining like more recent streams. I think we've hit quite a nice high when like obviously the Apple event happened, and then I hurt my algorithm a little bit by reacting to the Google I/O event and the OpenAI event, because nobody freaking cared. I have like a couple hundred views on that video instead of the thousands I usually get. So I'm not bummed. I'm doing this as a hobby. I'm enjoying this. But yeah, obviously, please do everything you can, guys, to support this channel, to encourage more people to join, to help with the algorithm and stuff like that. George, you might be in the minority, but you love the Smart Folio case the most because it lets the tilt the iPad multiple angles. Yes, but what can like a Smart Folio case do that you wouldn't be able to do with like a case that has like a kickstand, but then you also get like a regular like cover, right? Or even like that smart cover, which, like, by the way, one of my favorite Apple ads for like the iPad 2, if that rings a bell. Really, like you're saying, yeah, you couldn't catch up to the chip stream earlier, which was interesting for me, so you have to watch that video after. You see, so it really depends on the time, it depends on where the demographic comes from who watches. And Jan, you're saying let's not further talk about Google I/O. Yeah, that was an embarrassment, especially like I already thought the OpenAI event was cringe in the way it was conducted, but I thought at least the announcements were somewhat interesting, and Google just did neither. Well, they did the cringe thing, but they didn't have a great presentation, nor did they have interesting stuff to present.
Down the product, which sounds like it is going to give this iPad more rigidity overall. It's very interesting and a unique property to these new iPad Pros that just wasn't on the old version. So I think it's time to test out these new iPad Pros against the old ones and see which fare better. So first up here are the two 11-inch iPads. And I started off with some mild pressure points around these iPad Pros with the old one and the new one, and they were both completely fine in every situation. If there's a mild bend happening,
yeah, George, I can see why you would still like the. By the way, like a lot of people just like are weird in that regard, where they're like, oh, I don't like this accessory, so I think this accessory or this device or whatever shouldn't exist. That's not how Apple works. Apple exactly has to consider people like you who are like saying, oh, you prefer the Smart Folio case because it makes it as thin as possible, it's still like durable and whatever, right? I absolutely agree. There should be options, and this is why I've, for example, lamented the lack of like leather option accessories for iPads, because I would definitely prefer one. I would like to have different Magic keyboards even. I would like to Apple do what they Apple. There's a feature for that at Apple Accessibility. Oh yeah, we also need at some point to cover the new accessibility features, because I briefly mentioned them in my last video, but like obviously I didn't have quite enough time. So let me briefly look into iPad. Right, and when you look at this keyboard is case and stuff like that is honestly fantastic. I do believe it should be cheaper because it doesn't have backlit keys. I believe it should be like $199, but like this is partially why I got that Logic Combo Touch, because it just is an incredible design, and I think that Surface got it right in so many ways with having like a down bottom attachable keyboard. Now they integrate the kickstand right into the device, but you can obviously replicate it pretty easy with a back cover, also like help protect the device with it as well. You can do that design while protecting the sides, which is what the Combo Touch does. You can do it while still leaving the sides open, basically for appreciation, which is how Apple approaches it. Yeah, so it's honestly great in my opinion. It's the best part about the iPad 10, which obviously, if you consider that you need to use like that USB-C stupid Apple Pencil or whatever, obviously this is a compromised device, but it has like a lot of attention from Apple. And when you look at like just buying stuff, right? You can obviously, let's configure it briefly. Let's say blue, it's the best color. Let's say 256 gigs. Let's say I'm a baller and want it with 5G. I don't want to engrave it because I still want to sell it afterwards. Let's say I want the USB-C Apple Pencil, right? And here you have like the Apple Magic Keyboard Folio, which that's there. Let's say no keyboard. What are the accessories actually for it? Oh, Apple doesn't list them. Oh, that's lame. Sometimes they offer like stuff like that. iPad. Where's like iPad accessories in general? Oh god, accessories, iPad. Right, so you obviously have the very expensive stuff, the Magic Keyboard, the Apple Pencil Pro, but you do have stuff like the Smart Folio. Again, I'm a huge lover of the iPad 2's like smart cover. This feels like this is just that basically, but modern, and I would like to have that in leather because I'm really not a giant fan of polyurethane the way Apple does it. I think it just degrades way too fast in comparison to everything else. And then you can get that as just like a front cover, you can get it with the back. So yeah, in my opinion, Apple does a lot of great stuff and offers a lot of fun options. So and also again, when people tell you you need that Magic Keyboard, just as like basically as buying advice. Now, as I've said, I did have durability issues with my Combo Touch, but I don't know if that still is the case. This is for this one. This is for which iPad is that? It's for 7th, 8th, and 9th gen. Where can I please find like Combo Touch? Jesus, so many freaking like pop-ups or whatever, right? But you get it for the Pro and the Air. Those things are really much worth the money, considering again you also have like a huge price gap to the Magic Keyboard that is like 350 and 400 euros respectively here. So these prices actually are even more advantageous over like the Magic Keyboard in euro than they are in dollar. You got the color for the Air M2. Wait, which one did you get? The blue, the one that I just shown for the 10th gen iPad. Regardless, I'll wait for your response in the comments. I'll continue the video.
The last generation, but I want to switch back and step it up just a bit on this 11-inch model by standing up and adding some more force. Because the screen is a weak one, it is way easier.
So what he basically found that applying just regular force while sitting down didn't really do much, and now he's standing up.
The back, and I am hearing
basically applying more of like force with a lever.
Get this old iPad Pro to bend at all. Look at that flex in the body. Okay, now you can see a massive bend in the old iPad Pro. That's not even close here to being straight, especially when you put it up against a flat surface like a table. Back to the new.
Yeah, so the old one bent, no surprises there, at least not to me. Let's see how the new one fares.
2, 1. Wow, look at that flex of the new iPad Pro. You can definitely see a subtle bend, but you can really see it when you put it flat.
Yeah, and this is what also Jan said in the beginning of the chat, in a way, when he said like everything will bend if you apply enough force to it, and this is exactly that what we're seeing there. It's just that it seems like you need a little bit more force actually than you needed with the previous generation. Oh, you got like the Sage Smart Folio. Yeah, that's a nice color.
On the table here. And
what color did you get for the iPad itself?
Definitely a slight bend after stress testing this product. I'm really going to turn up the pressure now on the new iPad Pro. I am putting maximum force there. Let's take a look at the bend.
I don't think I want to hear him moaning that much.
Around the top of the iPad, similar on both models, but considering just how thin this is, I put my maximum.
I won't be stopping this as much as Jerry's video. We've obviously talked about the design. Now we see the old one actually bent more.
Actually is holding up better somehow.
Yeah.
Now for all realistic purposes, that was the last bend, but because these are still fully functional, I want to see how far we can push the bend.
You got the Starlight. Yeah, and you see, By the way, I'm not a huge fan of Starlight, but if you're enjoying it, you send it like with the love heart eyes emojis. Like, I absolutely am for all those kinds of options. In fact, I would love like if Apple were like, even instead of space black, were to go with like a titanium, with like, it wouldn't obviously be titanium, with like the blue from the titanium blue iPhone. That would be red.
Old model,
If people still use red.
Is the weak spot. And that bend in the screen, you can start to see, is really pronounced. The screen is like popping, and still no break. I'm gonna try again right here, but still fully functional. That's kind of amazing that they support this much even on the old version. Again, pushing on that central rib, it is just stupid how strong that this new iPad Pro is. Although we are starting to get a more pronounced bend in here. Here's an even crazier bend starting to take shape in the...
Yeah, and this is the point where I would say it becomes like completely useless, because I would just be constantly afraid, like if you bent it in the other direction, maybe in like a backpack or whatever, this would cause it to break. I would really try to find any way to repair this before or put it into a case, maybe barely, and then try to make the most out of it. But yeah, once you have it bent this much, you're kind of effed in the long term.
iPad Pro, but honestly, that new iPad Pro is still holding up with just the slightest bend here. You would almost not notice it. Okay, for now, let's call it there on the 11-inch iPad Pros. But now, on the much larger models, there's obviously a lot more screen and aluminum.
Yeah, the colors are not very pronounced
than the 11-inch.
on the current gen.
The 13-inch models, just as I did on the 11-inch variants, pretty gentle and soft, some pressure around different points of the device. And yet again, for any basic pressure points, these are going to be fine as long as it's not crazy. Okay, time for some more intense bends on the old iPad Pro, which does flex really easily. Definitely easier to bend when you focus on the weak points like corners, because there's just not as much there. And there's absolutely a bend in this iPad Pro at this point. Setting it down on the table, you can see right here a super significant change in the top left corner, which is where it seems like the weak point always is.
I mean, yes, but it also depends slightly just like the way you behave yourself as a human. If you feel like more comfortable with a specific edge and the way like angle at which you apply force, it will obviously be like reflected in the device itself. But yeah, this device does have more structurally weak elements than the previous one.
Here are these cameras. Now
than the new one.
The new 13-inch OLED model. Some more intense bends.
Oh, such a shame.
3, 2, 1. This feels so wrong to do, but I need to find the answer to this question, which is, does it hold up? So there you can see on the new iPad Pro, definitely a slight bend, but seemingly way less pronounced actually than on the old iPad Pro. Is it possible this new one is thinner? And
you can see, by the way, just how much thinner it is. Now, obviously, they're slightly elevated because of the bend in both cases, but actually this part is more elevated than this portion. And you can see, like, you have to understand, the 13-inch model, like, this is a reduction from 6.4 millimeters to 5.1. It's literally, like, even a huge jump, not just, like, 1 millimeter or whatever, but, like, percentage-wise, it's just an absolutely huge difference. And the camera bump might actually look pretty thick given that the device is thin, but it actually doesn't protrude that much. It probably would be still thicker than the 6.4 millimeter, especially around like where the camera like housing protrudes even slightly on top. But I would say this probably is like below 8 millimeters overall, which obviously, if you know, like the iPhone that goes to like over a centimeter and whatever, and protrudes even far above like an 8 millimeter thick iPhone body. So yeah, quite like I wonder what the quality of the camera, if Apple ever will consider changing like the camera quality a lot, given the thickness constraints, given the fact that everything else in the iPad is basically more worth improving, because for scanning documents this is already good enough. 12 megapixels, has like an LED flash to make it even higher quality, and then it's basically enough. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. This is also unnecessary. I would say the reason why I'm watching this video versus like prior Sam videos like from AppleTrack is because I actually think this video is marginally like more scientific than the stuff he does when he like randomly drops the Apple Vision Pro and now we're like what like I don't know, for example, how strong he is as an individual, but I can guesstimate, right? When he drops it on like the floor, it's like everything drops and breaks to a degree. How hard is your floor? At what angle did it exactly impact on the floor? Right, the angle here being super important because also of that curved outside that does like impact structural rigidity of the glass. How important is that actually for a VR headset that people are definitely only using at home? Like I know some people have taken to using it outside, but it's not really an advertised use case or whatever. And I know that some people had like hairline cracks in the middle of that, but then you go to Apple, tell them you weren't at fault at all. You tell them that basically you measured your face according to what Face ID told you, you put it on, over time it started developing those cracks, right? And you tell them you guys are basically at fault and you have to fix that. And as far as I have always had experiences with Apple stores and authorized Apple resellers, they basically always listen to feedback like this. It helps if you like go to the store and you're wearing like an expensive Apple Watch or whatever, and if you have like the latest gen iPhone with you, it shows them that you're like an engaged customer who spends a lot of money. Then they might have an even higher probability of agreeing with that repair request. So if you have a friend who either has like a newer iPhone and will lend it to you for an hour or so, or they have like a super expensive Apple Watch, put it on and use that to your advantage.
And stronger. I'm putting some more pressure on, the most I could possibly exert on this iPad, and from pretty much any angle you can now tell that this is not a completely straight iPad Pro.
No, but it's still usable.
It's still fully functional on the old model. So let's bring back the new iPad Pro.
And this is why I'm saying even a very slim, like not super durable case that introduces just like structural elements, basically doesn't even have to be like dead rigid itself, but the fact that like it basically stops the fact that there's only like 0.8 millimeters on top of the USB-C port and below it. So yeah, if you like just the smallest, thinnest, lightest of cases will basically prevent what we just saw.
Still holding up ridiculously well and do our most intense bend. 3, 2, 1. Oh, that is
I hate the moaning.
I also feel like it's just not really bendy. Taking a closer look here, there's absolutely more of a bend than we had before, and it's pretty dramatic. But then go over to this iPad Pro, and it's way worse on the old model after the same amount of force exerted. If I flip these iPads around, you can really see the difference. That is the old iPad Pro right there, and this is the new one. More of a bend in the middle there, where here a pretty dramatic
the all new iBand pad, yeah. It's like it's like an exercise in like media attention and whatever. Sam is known for that stuff. It's not like it like now basically his test is basically also going to Apple's advantage, right? While previously with Vision Pro it sort of could create negative media attention for Apple, or with like some other drop or bend tests or whatever. The fact that this is why I've said that, by the way, about the pricing, right, where I said, oh, people got used to believing that $129 for an Apple Pencil 2 is acceptable. Well, now that the Apple Pencil Pro is $129 and it is much better, and 6 years have passed, so a lot of inflation has accumulated, so now people actually start believing it's a good deal. And similar here, right, it might be $200 more expensive than the previous gen iPad Pro, but it's also only $100 more expensive than the previous iPad Pro when paired with 256 gigabytes of storage. And percentage wise, the difference for the 512 and 1 terabyte models actually becomes even smaller because the price increases by the same amount of $200 and $400 or whatever, but the base price is higher, and so suddenly it doesn't feel like quite the same level of difference. So Apple absolutely knows how to price their devices. I've always said, well, I've said it for like ever since covering stuff. I now fully believe that Apple knowingly overcharges around 10 to 15% on like the MSRP, not to make actually like all the monies on the MSRP. But for one, to make money on the early enthusiast adopters, right, who will buy at MSRP anyway, but also to create excitement when the price drops. Like if you see a device that costs $900, it doesn't actually feel cheap. It's still like super close to $1,000. You still will want to argue like how much storage does it have, how much RAM does it have, how expensive are its accessories, right? So you might look at a $900 MSRP device and believe like, well, maybe I'll wait until it's like 800, 810, 820 or whatever. But if you have $1,000 device, and believe me, Apple is making profit regardless if the iPad is $900 or $1,000, just a noticeably different amount of profit. But if you have $1,000 device, right, you don't look at it that differently from $900. It still probably attracts about the same audience, unless of course the $900 also has way more storage or RAM or whatever. But suddenly when it drops to $900, everything being equal, just psychologically it just feels much better to buy it at those $900, and suddenly you are like, okay, but now I also get like to save maybe $15-20 on the Magic Keyboard. Believe me, Apple makes profit whether it's sold at $350 or $320, doesn't matter. Maybe I'll wait for even like a $10 discount for the Apple Pencil Pro, and suddenly Apple doesn't make actually that much less money on you, but Apple has now encouraged people to buy the device at MSRP day one for a month or two. Then they've encouraged people to go through Amazon and stuff. Maybe people who have like Walmart memberships that give you like a discount in general. And because obviously when Apple sells their devices to those retail shops, they do give them a discount for like mass orders. And then for everything else, Apple just waits for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months later. You basically get that device at those same stores for even a little bit cheaper. And now otherwise it just wouldn't make sense to even keep devices for like 2 years in the lineup. Apple in the last quarter sold 12 million iPads despite not having had updates for any iPad hardware in well over a year, close to 2 years, and they were still selling because of discounts, because of a general interest in the fact that some devices just don't age that much. Like new tech is generally much more future proof, and people were still buying, and now people will buy these devices at MSRP, now bring up the revenue of the iPad even higher. But anybody who was previously toying with like buying a 10th gen iPad, well, that got a huge price reduction from $450 to $350. So if you ever were considering it prior, now you might look at like a slightly discounted, like maybe $550 version of that with a 256 gigabytes of storage, and suddenly you're paying more because the base price is lower, but you're like, well, now I can get 256 gigabytes at around 500, and now it's actually a good deal. And now the USB-C pencil has proven itself. That keyboard accessory looks good, but there are also like combo touch accessories from Logitech that make a lot of sense. Those might also be now very heavily discounted now that the 10th gen iPad has been on the market for a while. $350, now it makes way more sense to get it for a kit and something like that. Apple knows how to play with our expectations on pricing and stuff like that.
Realistic with these, I want to put pressure on the bottom and just bend up the top part of this iPad Pro, in which case it's still fully functional. And trying the same thing on
this is when you
Pro.
Stop applying just the force of your muscles and you legitimately start applying force of like your upper body strength and weight.
Oh, that is a way more significant bend. Just straight up, you can see it starts to flex like crazy because it is so thin. And I will say that after that intense bend, that is where we are seeing the most obvious disconfiguration of the new iPad
Disconfiguration?
Pro. It looks like
Okay.
actually down here near the battery on the side. I wonder if these can bend any more. Really?
No, we just saw where the batteries, that was pretty silly.
I'm going for the weakest points on the corners here.
It probably bends somewhere around where the speakers might be, but it does, like once you get to a device that thin, it's like and none of the internal elements are like hard diamonds or whatever, like everything will bend inside too if you apply enough force. The battery itself can bend both where its connectors are, but also it itself can bend. I wouldn't try to overanalyze this.
Accentuate the existing bend on this old model. Oh, that just cracked at the USB-C port.
Yeah, which is funny because JerryRigEverything obviously on the other side said something similar about where the microphone is. Here, obviously, as I said before, barely any metal around the USB-C port. That's where it breaks.
I didn't actually know it was possible to crack aluminum there.
You can crack everything if it's thin enough. You can probably crack a diamond if you make it thin enough.
Seeing that? That's insane. I mean, surely with a thinner...
Well, actually, it probably wouldn't be too difficult with a diamond, but you just would have to make it incredibly thin, because diamonds are known for their hardness, which makes them scratch resistance, not actually that much break resistance.
The C ports on the new model, it would be more fragile, right? Let's find out. Let's do some more flexing of this new iPad Pro. I'm trying the same bend now for the top. And
it's not a bug, it's a feature. Well, none of this is a bug. It's just like real physics, real design compromises. All design is compromised, by the way. When I say compromise, I just mean like having to deal with the realities of making something thin and light and still trying to make it durable. So yeah, it just makes sense.
Better. Again, I think because Apple has a rib running down the middle. They've actually, it seemingly looks like, fixed a weak point. Oh.
This is why the way if Apple like goes for like metal enclosure batteries inside like the next generation, I fully believe that could like add even more structural rigidity and stuff like that. So the future for iPad is rosy. If Apple can make this 5mm thick device that durable, imagine if they ever felt like making it slightly thicker, giving it even more structural rigidity internally. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much.
As I say that, the USB-C does crack because it is so thin. It was a satisfying crack, if I'm being honest. And here's when it really hit me.
I agree. I like that sound, even though it also hurt my soul a little.
In similar areas, they have bends in similar places. And all things considered, the thinnest iPad Pro should not be performing as well as it is. Which makes me want to go back and test the 11-inch models a bit more and like push more pressure on the middle. Oh, it is night and day different, though, I will say that. It still cracks at that USB-C way easier than I feel like it should. That USB-C has a huge weak point across these models just because there's barely anything there. It's crazy just picking up the 11-inch again, just how much thinner it is. And I am afraid if we push right in the middle...
I'll speed it up just a little bit so we can still get to the article I wanted to finish today, and then I'll be wrapping it up as we hit like the 2-hour 15-minute mark or something like that.
Now trying the same bend again on the
so yeah, the 11-inch iPad, just because it's smaller and it is a little bit thicker, breaks a little bit more, a little bit less, so it just makes sense. It's basic physics. It's still, I think this is wasteful in so many ways, because obviously those things are not getting repaired. I don't know if he will like recycle them. I hope he would just go to the Apple store and recycle them at least, so that they could like use everything they could outfit, though I do imagine that the employees there would absolutely hate him.
Spider crack on the top. I mean, if you put a lot of force on these specific points on the top and the bottom, bend it around that frame, it is still...
Maybe he just keeps those as like basically memorabilia in a way, because oh yeah, this was the time where destroyed 4 iPads.
Not aluminum. It cracks similar to plastic. Now moving on again to the new iPad Pro. Yeah, if you bend it, man, that flex is crazy right there. But it held up pretty well. If I go further, it is going to snap just like the other models.
Yep.
The same cracks going all the way down the display. Finally going to try the same thing to probably finish off this model. Apple's thinnest product ever. How does it hold up from the most intense bend yet?
It probably will break. Yeah.
Just heard the crack right there. But the aluminum
right in the middle
actually broke before the screen, which is pretty impressive. There is an even bigger weak point there now, though. So if I keep going, that's going to be the display crack, which is quite terminal here on the new iPad. Okay, just noticing this
still technically not a broken device though.
Crack specifically is getting super.
Yeah, and if you believe like that this will be handled by Apple Care, I believe. By the way, I believe voluntary like destruction is not covered by Apple Care whatsoever, because you then have to consider that he could be paying whatever like the the payment is, like it depends on the country or whatever, like for a full replacement of the device, because sometimes there will be like a motherboard failure, and Apple will usually not repair those. They will like give you a full new device, and then they will deal with the repairs like later on. Will try to maybe repackage that as a refurbished device or whatever. Maybe if it's absolutely not feasible to repair it, they will recycle it internally and deal with either the loss or whatever, or just with the very just with getting the profit margins on the iPad, and then basically making a zero-sum game on the AppleCare warranty. But yeah, I believe if this is the damage, then they just won't deal with that, as far as I know.
Messed up right there. You can see those dramatic.
Nor should they, by the way. No warranty should ever cover this. Like this is just not like if any warranty were to cover this in a then the warranty price would basically have to be absolutely equivalent to or higher than that of the iPad, because obviously you also have to deal with like labor costs and whatever. No, it just would be stupid.
Changes in color, especially accentuated on the white tones right there. But wow, this is fascinating. On the new iPad Pros, there is none of that discoloration. It's actually kind of hard to see the cracks unless you get up really close.
Yeah, it seems like the Tandem OLED in of itself, because of the dual layer thing, seems to be like the outer layer just doesn't break that much. It's like the discoloration might the discoloration on the previous models might also just be to the issues that liquid crystal displays will have once you like break apart the actual like crystal and whatever. But yeah, mostly I believe it's probably because of the dual layer.
Now, I think it's very important to review what we learned in this video, because
this looks so effed. I won't lie. If I had just seen this and not like a somewhat decent video surrounding it, I would hate this. I already don't like this, but I don't quite hate it because of the context. I think it's, for him, it's not that bad, but
do these videos to learn. I know that a lot of people don't believe me, but as soon as I saw that new iPad Pro, I needed to know, like, is it
well, by the way, I do have something else to cover right as we finished it.
No, it is not. That spine that Apple put along the logic board is very good unless you are bending the corners in for day-to-day use in your backpack, in your luggage, even if under a lot of duress. From what I've tested today, these new iPad Pros are going to broadly hold up, even though they are ridiculously thin. The second big thing I learned is that the OLED display, especially the tandem design, is crazy durable. It's way better than the old iPads, and something that Apple did not mention at all. The screens are just going to, even if damaged, look better on these new iPad Pros right here compared to the old ones. And by far the most impressive thing I learned today, something I repeated time and time again, it's the fact that every single display works still. The cameras underneath every model, even if obscured, work. The build quality underneath for realistic situations is really good. And that's the point that I want to stress here at the end of this video. You don't have to baby your new iPad Pro, that it's actually really strong.
Yeah,
this 13-inch model is just
it's not a bad conclusion. It's basically almost identical to what JerryRigEverything said.
I cannot believe how strong this thing is.
Jerry doesn't give you like recommendations in quite the same way, because he's more of like a general durability channel and less of like a consumer tech like recommendation channel. But yeah, it basically comes down to the same thing.
Close everything out. If you bought one of these new iPad Pros, enjoy this thing because it's not that fragile. I have my own on the new Magic Keyboard here with the Apple Pencil Pro. It's a sick product. This new keyboard and this haptic trackpad feels so good, and I have so many thoughts, so stay tuned.
Yeah, and this is why I don't hate Sam the way some people in the community do. He genuinely seems excited for new tech, but he does shit like this for attention, for some of his own intellectual curiosity, I'm sure. It depends, probably more the former than the latter, but again, YouTube is full of destruction porn, basically. So if we get some of that in the Apple sphere, I'm not surprised that it came to this.
Opinion on what Apple did with this product, because even from the durability to the actual experience so far, I mean, they nailed it out of the park for what the iPad hardware should look like. Because at the end of the day, I think maybe I just need to get out my frustrations with iPad OS.
You can all kiss my ass about iPad OS.
Thank you for watching. Thank you guys for supporting me.
Okay, so that was interesting. I wonder what like his revenue per view is, because like how many views does this have? Like downloads. This is 37,000 views, maybe 40,000 a little bit later on. Maybe it will explode to 100,000 or whatever. I know big channels have to have very different like revenue per view than like smaller channels like I have. And my channel is probably incomparable to most big channels in general because it's a live stream channel. So I actually get a lot of my support directly from you guys with stuff like super chats and whatever. I wonder if he like makes his money back, because that is like he probably got some of it with some discount, but like the new iPads he probably got to at least 95% of full price. So yeah, and then the old ones he probably got it like 80% full price. So yeah, definitely seems like or higher. So definitely not a cheaper endeavor to be making this. And of course, in the time he made this, he could have also made any other video. So there's like opportunity cost to consider as well when you're running a 440,000 subscriber channel. So that's pretty interesting. Of course, he also has to deal with the potential backlash and whatever. Granted, all PR is kind of good PR, but yeah, not always in these days, I would say. It has changed a little bit, in my opinion. So, Samsung. Now, the latest Samsung ad. Where is it? Let's just briefly check their website. I'll probably be watching anything without the latest. What, do they not have anything newer? Samsung ad creativity. Was it like uncreativity or whatever? Where is it? Like, it's so difficult to find Samsung. Like, the only Samsung stuff that ever has like any relevance in search in terms of like ads or whatever is always where they like do something related to Apple. So search engines are actually pretty bad. Samsung ad creativity. We don't crush creativity. Where's the ad? What's up with my internet? There it is, Tom's Guide. This is like a picture of it. There it is. So I'll yeah, whatever. So I'll watch it on mute because I don't know what happens with Samsung if they like call out your ads the same way. Which, by the way, like, kudos by the way to Apple still keeping up the crush video on YouTube. So that takes some balls, legitimately. But yeah, let's look at what Samsung is doing. So a person is walking through the room. The probably the same. Well, it's not literally the same room, but it's designed to be basically the same room as what Apple's Crush ad had shown, right? So you have like the giant press. You have like where the colors came out. You have like all the destroyed stuff there. You have like what could be vinyl records. It's actually like a very small reproduction. They obviously didn't want to destroy too much for an ad that shows them not destroying shit. Jan, you were saying you thought this ad from Apple was like genius. I liked it too. I said that I don't. Well, it depends, right? I like it as a creative idea. I don't quite love its implementation. I think it looked a little wasteful. I would have probably preferred it to be more like the Willy Wonka scene where stuff gets like condensed into new stuff. So maybe instead of all of it getting crushed, maybe it could have been called condensed or something like that, right? I think that would have been a little bit better, and it would have definitely avoided most of the backlash. But yeah, I have always said, and I covered in my prior videos, that the outrage against this was a combination of manufactured outrage and of course people trying, like, some people who are like artists, who are creatives, like literally giving their like no benefit of the doubt here. It has been like put into like Apple has been put into like the same bucket of like generative AI companies, where people are like, well, in the era of AI, Apple is now destroying your creativity. I'm like, well, Apple is not the forerunner in generative AI. Apple is actually one of the companies that still cares the most about like when it comes to big tech. Obviously, smaller companies are a little different. When it comes to a lot of creativity, right? They work with music, they work with Apple TV, right? They have like their creative tools from iMovie, GarageBand, Final Cut, Logic. The way they even like always invite like creatives and developers of creative apps to their event, the way they even like showed off Procreate for the new iPad Pro. Like this idea that Apple is somehow in the same bucket as like Meta is so ridiculous to me. So she picks it up, she puts on her notched Galaxy Tab S Ultra up, and she starts playing a completely worthless guitar. If you know how acoustic bodies work, yeah, it probably sounds like something, just sounds like crap. Let's briefly turn on the audio. Hopefully that doesn't get the video flagged. Yeah, so the guitar sounds like crap. She plays it. Which again has nothing to do with like the Galaxy Tab, has nothing, like Apple's ad was specifically about the iPad being thin, light, creative, productive. Now they're trying to make this into an ad for their device, even though obviously this has nothing to do with their device. She could have literally put up a sheet of paper there, whatever. Creativity cannot be crushed. It's basically the motto of this ad. And then Samsung adds insult to injury, basically saying Galaxy Tab S9 series with Galaxy AI, and Samsung never missed it. They should have just completely left out the tablet entirely. That's true. People also said that if that guitar was in any way destroyed for this, then it's just stupid. And now they're like, oh, Galaxy AI, right? Like, dude, what? Like, I know they're probably like obligated to advertise it in a way because also of their cooperation with Google, but like literally, bro, you're advertising AI right when you said creativity cannot be crushed. It's so boring. As you're saying, Jan, it's so unimaginative. Unironically, this has nothing to do with creativity. By the way, Samsung, is it Samsung Mobile, the channel? Because I do want to see what people are like saying under Galaxy S24 privacy have they hidden like that video? Because there was a lot of backlash to it saying that like, oh, this video itself is uncreative. Oh, did you destroy shit to actually say that you don't destroy stuff? I don't actually know. Samsung US maybe, like videos, like say hello to music frame. No, it's like so weird. Whatever, like I wanted to show you this just to show you that like people who believe that Apple is somehow like, oh, Apple is big and bad, and when people cover it as big and bad, it's because they deserve it. No, people cover them because they're big. Other companies have done similar ads. LG has actually done almost the exact same ad years ago, but nobody cares unless it's Apple, to a degree that it's actually an enormous compliment to them that anybody would even care about this stuff. And the fact that Samsung would copy this. So yeah, if you ever thought that like imitation is the biggest form of flattery, this form of like criticism is in many ways imitation itself. As long as the batteries don't explode, everything is good. Yeah, I don't actually know how Apple treated any of like tech that was inside of their destruction machine, but for them it was like people mainly complained about the destruction of like musical instruments and stuff like that. For some reason, people didn't care as much about the fact that like they supposedly destroyed like a video editing station of like PC and monitors. But I'm not even sure if Apple destroyed every single thing that was under that press. Maybe some of it was like computer animated. Maybe some of it was like combined shots from different perspectives or whatever. Maybe they destroyed some stuff only partially and whatever. So to me, all of this doesn't matter. I just wanted to like basically put that crush ad controversy completely to rest, telling you how stupid all of the coverage around it is. And again, they're saying it's Apple's discontinued iPad commercial. It technically never was actually put on TV. It was just shown during the event. It was planned as like a TV commercial thing, or like a commercial on the internet. But Apple still actually has kept it up on YouTube. And maybe I'll find the Samsung ad on YouTube, but apparently it's not that easy to find it for whatever reason. So we've talked a lot. I would like to finish reading this article about iPadOS. We've heard that in like in the Sam video that like his biggest complaint with these devices is iPadOS. So we actually came pretty far here. We talked about multitasking on the iPad. We talked about missing apps and not so desktop class apps. We talked about like audio limitations. So and when we come to multitasking, then we've talked about how Apple has changed the multitasking user interface quite a lot over time for the iPad. For the Mac, if they had followed a similar pattern, that meant since 1984 we would have now had like 13 different multitasking things. He's saying that split view and slide over have not evolved much, but then Stage Manager was basically put on top of them. The counter that this person brings up over stuff like split screen multitasking and slide over. It's like the OnePlus Open UI. Again, I've said in the prior video that one does have interesting tricks, but those are also very much bound a little bit into its foldable gimmick. It also is a little bit more complicated, a little bit more cumbersome, but for pro users, I could probably see the point that like having more than two apps side by side, while it's still technically not a feature like Stage Manager, could be useful. So yeah. It's interesting, but while I agree with some criticism for multitasking, I agree with them actually somewhat less than I did with like audio limitations or even like desktop class apps, because I think that just for one, not every iPad is a 13-inch iPad. Then there's also the point that the iPad has a 4:3 aspect ratio, 4:3 aspect ratio screen, and the fact that like all those controls, once you start doing them with your fingers, doesn't matter how intuitive they are, they just feel worse than if you're doing them with a mouse and keyboard. And this is, since the iPad is primarily a touch first device, this is why this does feel worse. Next, this person continues with Spotlight. Speaking of the basics, we need to talk about Spotlight for iPadOS. Any respectable modern computer, especially one from Apple, should have a fast and reliable app launcher. Spotlight for iPad, despite some minor improvements over the last few iPad releases, still isn't that. Wait, what? Like, if I do... Wait, for one, I don't need Spotlight search to open new apps. I open them from the dock. I have like my app library on the right of my dock, and then I click that, and then I find every app, any app I want, and then I just drag it on the screen. That's perfect for multi-touch. As has been documented over the years, the iPad version of Spotlight has long been afflicted by slow and inconsistent performance. This has literally never been my experience. No, I don't want it on Twitter. Open it when I have a hardware keyboard paired with iPad and do command space and type an app to open, it misses the first character. This is from 2019. Guys, I'll do exactly that with like my iPad. You won't see it, but please take my word for it. So I connect my keyboard. I apologize, don't have that much space here. Right, and I'll even do like the command space thing and not the dedicated like Spotlight search button, which is now there and first button. okay, if you literally type the button, like if you press it basically simultaneously, that's not how regular people, like, this has nothing to do with speed. This has to do with like UI, like the fact that Spotlight has to like show up on the screen before it shows up on the no, I saw a delay between typing it and before it showed up in Spotlight, but if I do it right after I invoke it, not simultaneously, it actually types in the D and then suggests Disney Plus to me. So D. Yeah, I actually typed in 2 letters because I was like doing it so frantically, and it recognized both. And if I do it with like the Spotlight search button, yeah, it still recognized the letter despite. And I clicked it with the button seems to now actually be faster than the command. So yeah, this is antiquated bullshit as a complaint. I legitimately say this is probably the worst point this person has made thus far, and I've been pretty positive on this article. This is why I'm finishing it at all. To this day, sometimes I invoke Spotlight and search for an app that I know I have installed on my iPad, and no results come up. Wait? Yeah, some apps have like a weird, like the way you search for them, but that's honestly a problem for those apps. It's like it literally like it has zero implications for like any Apple app, and it's the way that apps are like basically documented internally. This is, for example, if I look for Twitter and search, right, it doesn't come up until I've fully typed in the word Twitter. And then it recommends the X for me. Well, if I type in X, then X is right there, and if I put the enter button, it would open Twitter on my iPad. But guess why that doesn't work? That's entirely up to how the app is internally documented by the file system, but that is up to the developer. Actually, when X was originally renamed into X, right, well, it's still Twitter, it actually still lets you type in T, and it absolutely would know that it's Twitter, but it's then subsequent releases where I assume they changed some of the documentation of the app internally, and now you have to basically type in at least TW, but more like TWITTER before it actually shows up. So no, this is not an Apple issue, and you will have the same issue on the Mac too. Then I dismiss Spotlight, try again, and the app appears. That's a bug. And it's not a bug that is anyway in the same way replicable as the issues of the Files app. I have said I recognize that Files app could be faster, that it could avoid certain issues, like when, for example, during transfer of really large files, but this seems to be like a very, very like not representative bug of the overall user experience. Other times, Spotlight gets stuck. Either I press Command Space and the search box doesn't appear, or my keyboard arrow keys don't do anything. Never happened to me, and I use Spotlight search a lot. Usually a reboot fixes these issues. Reboot? Like of the device? Really? Sometimes I have to detach my Magic Keyboard and reattach it for Spotlight to receive keyboard input again. I've had like keyboard input issues, but never specifically to Spotlight. Then there's the Find My Stuff issue. So many times I try looking for a document inside an app that supports Spotlight indexing, or perhaps a shortcut from the Shortcuts app, and no results come up. Yeah, I've heard that maybe it doesn't work that great with like shortcuts. It definitely works with everything inside the Files app or whatever. So again, probably should be blaming the app that supports Spotlight indexing but doesn't do too great of a job with it. Then I try again after a few hours and results do appear. That has literally never happened to me. I don't know. It drives me insane. It's been like this for years now. These iPads are compounded by the inability to install Spotlight replacement. Yeah, Raycast, and there's Alfred on macOS. The iPad has neither the APIs nor the policies. Yes, I agree. So this person says he's left using a half-baked, inconsistent launcher that mostly encumbers my work. Sorry, man. I just have never seen it. And I've used so many iPads on so many beta versions. It's I think I probably would have come across it if it was that severe. Next is something that I will probably agree with. Lack of background processes and system-wide utilities. As I said, this would impact my workflow a lot because stuff like that would allow me to run OBS in the background. Of course, if it also had like different audio stuff, controls and whatever. And now allow me to wish for one Mac-like feature that is not even that esoteric. iPadOS needs to gain support for executing long-running complex tasks in the background, not referring to background app refresh, which is the system that lets apps stay active in short bursts in the background to receive push notifications and other updates. I'm talking about the ability to tap into the power of the M series chips and the iPad's RAM. Yes, but also this would kill some of the instantaneous performance of the device. Once you have a lot of stuff running, it could create thermal issues. It would definitely deplete the battery faster. And you have to consider that like the 13-inch iPad Pro has a smaller battery than every Mac on the market right now. And to keep specific tasks running in the background while you're doing something else. You don't need to look far to see where iPadOS is failing in this regard. If you use Apple's own Final Cut Pro for iPad, one of the company's very showcases of the new iPad Pro, and begin exporting a video, then switch apps for a second, yeah, you should probably keep apps on the iPad with like Stage Manager at least there, or with like split screen, or create a new app and slide over. If you actually have a very productive app, I agree with that. And it's definitely very pronounced on something like Files, as I said before. If you simply switch workspaces in Stage Manager or accidentally click on incoming notification, an entire project's export will fail. Does it always do that? Maybe I should use Final Cut Pro on iPad for a little bit. From a computer that now comes with the M4 and in certain configurations 16 gigs of RAM, this is absurd. Mac laptops with far less impressive specs have been able to keep tasks running in the background for decades. The iPad, now 14 years old, can't. Again, I've said there are other considerations there. This limitation extends beyond the realm of pro apps such as Final Cut or Logic, and it applies to all kinds of software that, due to the nature of iPadOS, is impossible to find on the platform. There's a mix of technical limitations, policy decisions, that's correct. Still impossible for an application that wants to perform something in the background to exist on iPadOS. From clipboard managers and video encoders to automation utilities and AI-based photo editors. Well, all of those. Well, clipboard managers are different, but video encoders, well, those things can run. They just might have issues when being forced into the background. If you want to run a time-consuming task in the background on iPad, you are out of luck. As a result, not only have these limitations fostered an environment in which third-party developers are actively discouraged from bringing true desktop class experience to iPad, but existing iPad ads still largely feel like blown-up versions of their iPhone counterparts. That's not correct. Just the presence of several apps from Photoshop to Final Cut and Logic, that is not true. After all, if the same limitations are shared between a phone and tablet, it's not quite the same limitation, and 16 gigs of RAM iPad supports giving up to 12 gigs of RAM to even like any individual app, so no, it's not quite the same as an iPhone. What's an iPad but an iPhone version dressed up with a larger layout? Well, fundamentally, a lot of people like that about iPad 2, right? The fact that it's efficient, that it's simple to use, that it has a user interface very similar to their phones, that it uses basically the same applications. So pros and cons. And I also want to remind people again and again, not every iPad out there is an M4 iPad Pro, right? Certainly not every iPad out there is like a 16 gigs of RAM iPad. If you want to use a clipboard manager on iPad, you have to keep the app open, just like on an iPhone. Yeah, I agree. Stuff like that should have a new API, or you have to give, like, in my opinion, like a very specific permission for that. There is like, it's not like Mac doesn't have those kinds of settings to control as well. But yeah, iPad needs to be a little more permissive when it comes to things like that. iPadOS closed iPhone-like nature has reverberated throughout other parts of iPad experience. For instance, system-wide utilities can currently exist on the platform. Customization tools, task managers, quick capture windows, alternative emoji pickers. Yeah, but I never use any of that crap basically beyond like something like my thermal management system or whatever on my Mac. So I agree with like that Apple should over time like open up iOS, iPadOS to more features like that. But at that point I also don't think that should be iPad specific. Like a clipboard manager arguably is just as useful on an iPhone, and at that point it would still be just the iPad blown up as an iPhone, but now a more functional blown up iPhone. Apps that do not execute memory-intensive background, yes, but they do have security and privacy concerns and battery life concerns that Apple does not like on iOS and iPadOS. Simply can't exist on iPad. Does it have to be this way? Apple is well within their rights to choose how they want iPadOS to behave, but when the OS powers computers that is ostensibly sold as a laptop replacement, this argument is like it's a laptop replacement depending on your use case. If you know that your use case needs certain features that don't exist on iPadOS, then it's not a laptop replacement for you. It's like not every ad applies to every person. Like it's just like even like the great Apple Watch Ultra that can dive very far, and it can absolutely be a replacement for like diving watches. It will not be a replacement for literally every diving watch out there. Some that might go to even deeper depths, some that might have so many buttons that you basically like obviously would prefer that over like the like 2-3 buttons on the Apple Watch. So yeah, it's like it can absolutely be a laptop replacement with all those things. To be fixed later this year, but only for some. I heard you. Some of these problems will be addressed later this year thanks to the Digital Markets app in Europe, which has been extended to apply to iPads as well. If, for example, yes, we'll see the likes of Clip and other side-loaded apps come to iPad. Clip is like a clipboard manager. And it's all, by the way, it hasn't really worked that well for me when I installed it on my iPhone, so I don't know what's up with that. And it's also obvious that we'll receive support for non-WebKit browsers to replace Safari. Besides the fact that these changes are going to be limited to Europe, they also aren't tied to deeper global policy-related changes on iPadOS. The issues I've outlined so far and the others I'll continue highlighting below don't indicate that Apple is willing to open up the foundation of iPadOS to allow for more flexible desktop-class computing. These DMA-related changes just mean that Apple is complying with the law and covering the essential functionalities requested by the EU. Hiding behind the DMA is a hopeful force for structural iPadOS changes is a farce. At the core of the problem lies Apple's reticence to take iPadOS to the next level, and the DMA has nothing to do with it. The change, once again, needs to happen from the top down. I agree. If you want those changes, you don't want them to be enacted by the EU. You don't want Apple fighting those changes. You want those changes to be actually something Apple wants and cares about, because that's the only way you will ever get like a really good result. So inefficiency by 1,000 cuts. This is like, I believe, like a summary almost. I will basically finish this article, I think, when I'm back, because for now I do want to wrap up, and I think most people have by now left the chat, which makes sense given the hour and given everything else, given that this is also now a pretty long video, and I do have to pack for tomorrow when I'm going on my trip. So I'll remember this, and afterwards I think there will be like also like almost a summary here. So this is a good article. I think we can learn a lot about it from it, not just in the sense what this specific person thinks, what maybe many in the community think. Maybe we can also like take some specific things from here and see how like what is most relevant, what is easiest to fix and stuff like that. So I would like to finish that another time. Thank you guys so much for joining. As always, if you're watching this either live or afterwards, please subscribe, please like, please share, please comment. If you catch me live, leave a super chat, leave a super sticker if you feel like doing so, or subscribe to my Patreon to support this channel in the long term. As I've said, I'm going on a small hiatus. Hopefully hopefully not too long. Hopefully I'll be back by around next Thursday at the very latest, but I'll let you know, and I'll keep engaging with you guys on Twitter and stuff like that. So let's see what that hiatus does to my YouTube algorithm. I hope you guys will still consider watching and supporting my videos. Please, as always, let me know what you would like to see me cover next, or if you have like suggestions for any changes in the type of content I make or whatever. I'm really enjoying the streams. They've gotten much more lively. We've gotten people from all over the world commenting and stuff like that, so that helps out a lot. Thank you guys so much for helping us grow. I'll see you next time. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.